It's 3 after, so I think we're going to get started. And I want to first pass it over to our interpreters to talk about language justice for us.
Hi, we will be practicing language justice in this space by providing Spanish interpretation. At its core, language justice is the right we each have to speak in the language we are most comfortable in. We recognize the limitations of our practice, as today we are only providing Spanish interpretation, and there may be other languages represented on this call.
En este espacio vamos a practicar la justicia lingüística, proveyendo interpretación al español. En su núcleo, la justicia lingüística es el derecho que todos tenemos de comunicarnos en el idioma en el que nos sentimos más cómodos. Reconocemos las limitaciones de nuestra práctica hoy, ya que solo estamos proveyendo interpretación al español y puede que haya más idiomas representados en la llamada.
We recognize that language is a place of connection, but also a place of trauma.
Reconocemos que el lenguaje es un lugar de conexión, pero también es uno de trauma.
We recognize the fact that the cities where we live and work are in indigenous lands, and that colonization has erased thousands of languages.
Reconocemos el hecho de que las ciudades en las que vivimos y trabajamos son tierras indígenas y que la colonización borró miles de idiomas.
We recognize the loss of languages due to slavery, and the fact that today, many of us do not speak the language of our ancestors.
Reconocemos la pérdida de idiomas a través de la esclavitud y el hecho de que hoy muchas de nosotros no hablamos el idioma de nuestros ancestros.
Language justice is rooted in a history of resistance by communities and peoples whose voices have been silenced for generations. And to practice language justice is to focus on decolonization and a healing approach to language.
La justicia lingüística está enraizada en una historia de resistencia de comunidades y pueblos cuyas voces han sido silenciadas por generaciones. Y practicar justicia lingüística es enfocarnos en la descolonización y en un enfoque sanador hacia el lenguaje.
Practicing language justice is everyone's responsibility. As such, we ask that you do your part by speaking slowly and clearly. In Spanish, for instance, it takes 30% more words to say the same thing as it does in English.
Practicar la justicia lingüística es la responsabilidad de todos. Como tal, te pedimos que hagas tu parte hablando lenta y claramente. El español, por ejemplo, es 30% más largo que el inglés y deben tener esto en cuenta para que los intérpretes puedan reproducir todo su mensaje al español.
If you're on the Spanish line, you might be surprised to hear some words end in an E that usually end in an A or an O. This is not a mistake, but part of our commitment to using inclusive language. Thank you for having us tonight.
Si estás en la línea de español, puede que te sorprenda escuchar algunas palabras terminando en E que usualmente terminan en A o en O. Esto no es un error, sino parte de nuestro compromiso de comunicarnos en un lenguaje inclusivo. Muchas gracias por tenernos aquí esta noche. Para comunicarse a la línea de español y escuchar la llamada en español, mire en el recuadro del chat el número de teléfono con el número de la línea de la reunión, que deben de marcarla con un signo de número al final, y luego el código, que es la contraseña. Va a decir password, primero va a decir meeting ID, y ahí van a marcar el 999-1553-7698, signo de número. Y luego, cuando le pida el password, van a marcar el código 600306. Buenas noches.
Thank you so much to Vero and Margot for interpreting for us this evening. Welcome, everyone. If you would like to see closed captions, live captioning, we have those available to you. You want to look at the bottom bar here on Zoom, and you should see closed caption as an option. If you click on that, you can choose the option for subtitles. And thank you to Farzana, who is doing our captioning this evening. Hi, everyone. My name is Kieran. I'm one of the members of the Seed the Vote political education team, and I'm happy to be our moderator this evening. I use she and her, they and them pronouns, and I'd like to welcome you here. I'm coming to you from Huichin, which is the ancestral name for the city I live in, which is also called Oakland, California, on unceded Ohlone territory. I want to acknowledge the ancestors that have guarded and stewarded and cared for the land upon which I live. I'm very lucky to live in on lands where we have organized indigenous resistance. The Segorite Land Trust, which is an urban women's-led land trust, is working on rematriating Ohlone land to Ohlone people. And for those of you who live or work on Ohlone land, they request that we pay our Shu'umi land tax to help support indigenous land rematriation. And I invite all of you to look at and familiarize yourselves with the indigenous organizing on your lands as well, and how you can support the rematriation of indigenous lands in your area. I'm going to introduce our format. We decided to go short and sweet this evening because we know a lot of us are doing a lot. So this is a 1 hour beautiful series of 3 presentations. It's going to be a bit less interactive. So we have chat available for asking questions, but we'll be hearing from 3 different presenters this evening. We'll be hearing first from Max Elbaum, who is another member of the Seed the Vote political education team, as well as an editor at Organizing Upgrade. Max has been involved with peace and anti-war and radical movement since the 1960s, and is the author of Revolution in the Air, a history of efforts to build a strong US left coming out of the 1960s upsurge against racism and war. So Max will be speaking for about 15 minutes on a general assessment of the balance of forces and why we can beat back any attempt to carry out a coup or steal the election. Second, we'll be hearing from Nelini Stamp, who is the Director of Strategic Partnerships and Youth Engagement for the Working Families Organization, which is backed by labor and community-based organizations. In 2008, Nelini joined the New York Working Families Party staff, working on numerous electoral campaigns across New York State. In 2011, Nelini's work on the ground at Occupy Wall Street helped bridge the gap between labor, community-based organizations, and Occupy. During her time within the Occupy movement, Nelini helped plan large-scale direct actions against austerity. And during the 2012 NYC Stop and Frisk debates, Nelini helped organize community, faith, labor organizations to rally against racial profiling. In 2012, Nelini helped start the Dream Defenders in Florida, focusing on organizing and training youth in nonviolent civil disobedience, civic engagement, and direct action around the school to prison pipeline. And Nelini will be speaking about the Working Families Party's election defense work. And then lastly, we'll be hearing from Jill Shenker. Jill is the campaign director here at Seed the Vote. And when not mobilizing thousands of people to defeat Trump, Jill works at San Francisco Rising and supports other social justice organizations as both a trainer and consultant. She spent 15 years organizing domestic workers in the Bay Area nationally and internationally. And Jill is going to be speaking to Seed the Vote's plans, who Seed the Vote is working with and taking leadership from for all levels of protecting the results. That's it. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to you, Max, to start us off. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks, Karen. Hi, everybody. We're in this conversation today because we know there's a tremendous amount at stake in the election. We're worried about what may happen on November 3rd and what Trump's going to do if he doesn't like the result. There's plenty of reason to be worried. Anyone who isn't worried isn't paying attention. But the good news is that thousands of people across the country are gathering in meetings just like this one to get grounded and prepared for anything that Trump does. Because of the work so many of you have done and the preparations being made that Nelini and Jill are going to talk about more specifically later in this call, we have every reason to be confident that when the dust settles, our side is going to prevail. My charge was to lay out the landscape, what we're up against, and the factors that mean if we do our work right, we're going to win. So here goes. For anyone who still had any doubts, the response by Trump and the Republicans to the tragic death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg made everything crystal clear. We're in a raw struggle for power. There is no level of lies and hypocrisy too low for the Trump camp to use to try to hold on to power and implement their agenda of entrenching a nakedly racist authoritarian state. The two-party electoral system has long had structural features that work in favor of the enemies of democracy and social justice. The racist and anti-majority rule structure of both the Electoral College and the Senate are pillars of that system, and so is the judicial system that's long been a defender of white supremacy, most recently by gutting the 1965 Voting Rights Act and validating the intensified voter suppression of the last few years. Still, within the limits of this unfair system, there were some rules and norms about elections that were accepted by all the major players. Most votes would be counted, and the candidates who lost according to the rules, even the unfair rules, would accept the outcome. Those days are gone. We're not yet at the stage where the president can simply declare he won and stay in power, but we're also can no longer assume that the election will have a fair count and the result, even according to these unfair rules, will be accepted. We're somewhere in between. And exactly where we are will be tested and decided by the struggles of the next 2 to 10 weeks. To formulate an effective plan of action, we need a clear-eyed assessment of the balance of strength between the contending forces.
And Max, sorry to interrupt. Could you slow down just a little bit for the interpretation? That would be really helpful. Thank you.
Sure, sorry. The Trump camp has the advantages of incumbency, a Senate majority, a significant edge in the courts, and majority control of 26 state delegations to the House. They have a deployable force of activists, including armed fascists. They have a robust information system to keep their base in line: Fox News, Talk Radio, Sinclair Broadcasting, and the rest. The glue of white grievance is what holds the Trump bloc together. For about 40% of the country, it has proved stronger than all the terrible things that Trump has done and said, including the death through criminal mismanagement of over 200,000 people in this country. The racist right has been working for decades to discredit fair elections, and Trump has escalated this to a fever pitch, taking the line that if he doesn't win, it can only be because the election has been rigged. Put bluntly, they have worked hard to prepare their base for a coup, and the court decisions and voter suppression that's already happened show that steps toward that kind of coup are already taking place. So we're up against a very formidable and dangerous foe. But I believe we have a stronger hand. First, we're part of the majority. Let me repeat that. The majority of this country and of voters are against Trump, and we are part of that majority. And let me add, though it's not going to show up in the vote, we're also part of a huge global majority. We're carrying the torch in this fight for people from Mexico to Palestine and all over the world who are fighting against imperial domination, white supremacy, and anti-democratic rule. Second, there's a huge ecosystem of radical, progressive, and pro-democracy organizations doing electoral work and focused on beating Trump that did not exist in 2016. Speakers from the Frontline and Seed the Vote are on this call. A host of state-based organizations like Seed the Vote Partners in Arizona, Pennsylvania, and Florida, unions, local and state and nationwide community organizing networks, artists and athletes, with LeBron James the most prominent, have weighed in. Many of these are rooted in those communities that are the most heavily against Trump, but not excited about voting for Biden. Many are experienced in and oriented toward street protests and direct action. And we have the advantage that comes from the fact that the ruling class and the broader political class are divided. The institutions of the state that will determine who counts the votes and what votes are counted, local election boards, state boards, courts, legislatures, governors, are not all under the control of our enemies. And even a large section of the ruling class is against Trump, and an even larger section is reluctant to let go of the tradition of a transfer of power that is both peaceful and accepted as legitimate by the society as a whole. That tradition is very important to the ruling elite, both in terms of their concerns for domestic stability so they can go on with their profit-making machine, and also for what's left of US soft power that they want to project globally to shore up their empire. That's what accounts for the difference that we saw in the last few weeks between Trump and McConnell. Trump says he may not cede power, but McConnell, even without criticizing Trump directly, insists that there will be an orderly transfer of power according to the Constitution. It's also why the broad coalition Protect the Results, initiated by Indivisible and Stand Up America, includes groups like Republicans for the Rule of Law, as well as unions, community groups, and radical organizations. Acting on this assessment has many different components. The first one is turning out the maximum vote against Trump. Our challenge is not only to ensure his defeat in battleground states, but to build the biggest possible popular vote against him nationwide. It makes it the most difficult for Trump to challenge the results, and it's the best way to open up divisions in the Trump camp and isolate the most reactionary, racist, and fascist components. Next is engaging in the narrative battle, sending a compelling message to millions that explains what is happening in this election and why. The broad anti-Trump coalition is off to a fairly good start on this, framing the current battle as one to protect democracy against authoritarianism. But it's important for us to go deeper. Trumpism's anti-democratic thrust is completely bound up with the defense of white supremacy. White supremacy has been at the core of the anti-democratic side of US history from its origins in the genocide of the indigenous people and enslavement of people of African descent. Trump is tapping into those deep roots. That's what Make America Great Again is all about. When we popularize the narrative that highlights the connection between authoritarianism and white supremacy, we're grounding ourselves and others in the understanding that will be needed to achieve racial justice and the kind of structural change everyone on this call is fighting for. On election day, we'll need to counter intimidation and attempts to disenfranchise voters at the polls. Republican so-called poll watchers, and in some cases armed militias, are likely to be out in force. There's large-scale efforts underway on our side to have poll watchers and legal people out in even larger numbers. The Frontline, Mi Gente, United Against Trump, and hundreds of local and state groups are readying for election day. I think people are going to put some links in the chat about specifics. In the crucial period right after November 3rd, if Trump challenges the outcome, mass mobilizations and protests, including actions at schools and workplaces, will be essential. One purpose of those is to demonstrate with our bodies that we have the moral high ground, and protecting the results in 2020 is protecting democracy and rejecting bigotry. A second purpose is to send the message to those in the various bodies that will have a say in counting and reporting the results that it's not only the right thing to do, but it's in their own interests to respect the results. A stolen election, more accurately called a coup, will produce an illegitimate government that will not be able to govern the country. The majority will not just hold signs saying, "He's not my president," will act on that day in and day out. How we pour into the streets and what specific actions we'll take, what our targets will be, can't be predicted yet. It'll depend on how things unfold, hour by hour and day by day. There'll be a distinction between what has to take place in contested states and states where the outcome is not contested. It's not really a national election, it's 51 simultaneous state elections. Trump may make general claims about millions of illegitimate voters voting, but in practice, his coup attempt has to come down to state-by-state challenges to the particular results in each of those states. Different states have different procedures and timetables for counting and reporting the vote. Every battleground state right now has a contingent of political and legal groups preparing to do whatever it takes to get and certify an accurate count of every vote. They'll assess every specific situation, determine actions and targets, and how people outside their state can assist, spreading the word with through the nationwide formations that have been developed, such as Protect the Results and Choose Democracy. It's also worth noting that the Biden team is preparing as well. There's not going to be a repeat of 2000 when Al Gore told his people to stand down and let Bush steal the election. Though the fight's going to come down state by state, massive turnouts everywhere will be necessary to back the fights in battleground states and demonstrate to the powers that be that a popular majority is not going to stand for a coup. Already there are plans underway for national days of action on Wednesday and I think Saturday of election week. And there's motion in the labor movement to talk about work stoppages up to and including a general strike. The call from all corners of the anti-Trump coalition is for mass nonviolent action, but we're not in control of events. The racist right and Trump himself are doing everything they can to provoke violence. They are looking for an excuse to call out the forces of the state to serve as Trump's coup Gestapo. Everyone needs to be prepared. Connect with people you trust and act together. As the Movement for Black Lives says, find your lane. Think in advance about what you are prepared to do and what risks you're prepared to take. Follow the lead of local, state, and nationwide formations that have been preparing for this for weeks and months. They will provide information and guidance as to where to gather and what to expect. There's no guarantees, but there's strong grounds to be optimistic about how this is going to go. This offers us a chance to be part of a massive pro-democracy coalition against racism and authoritarianism, and take a crucial step in the direction of a better future. I'm an old man now. These last few weeks, my mind has kept returning to the night of March 31st, 1968. That's the night that Lyndon Johnson withdrew from the 1968 presidential race and people spontaneously poured into the streets all over the country. Every one of us who had been protesting that racist war in Vietnam felt a surge of energy. We had played a part in ousting a president of the United States. Like today, that didn't mean the end. There was still plenty of work ahead. That imperial war dragged on for 7 more years, more blood, more killing. And on so many other fronts, there were big fights to wage. But it was a turning point. We had taken part in a day that meant that from that day on, the US defeat in Vietnam was inevitable. Taking part in that moment was a transformative experience for so many in my generation. It showed what collective power for peace and justice could accomplish and set many of us on a course for lifelong activism. I believe the next few weeks can provide just that kind of moment for new generations. A victory over Trump will not just end the presidency of this particularly deranged individual. It can be a powerful blow against the racist right in general and a huge boost to the radical surge that's underway right now throughout the country and in many places around the world for a world of multiracial democracy and peace instead of racism and war. This is your moment, and I know everyone on this call will make the most of it. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Max. It's an honor to have you here with us. I'm going to pass it over next to Nelini. Again, Nelini is going to be sharing about the work of the Frontline and the Working Families Party, specifically on doing voter protection work and their post-election plans. Thanks, Nelini.
Thank you. It's always hard to follow Max, and I'll try my best. It's good to be here with you all. Nelini si ella on Lenape land in Brooklyn, New York, and Canarsie land. So Max explained the whole situation that we're in, and I'm just going to talk about some of the work that a lot of our organizations are doing together to fight back on this administration. So one, just like everybody who's participating in Seed the Vote and across the country and with the Working Families Party, we're going to do everything, and we are doing everything between now and Election Day to get out the vote in massive numbers. We know that people like us created the progressive wave of 2018 that saw Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. This year in primaries across the country, we saw folks like Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, and others who are representing a bigger wave of progressive values, anti-racist values, and some anti-capitalist values coming in to take on democratic challengers that have been in power for a long time and winning, because they are on the freedom side. And we know that it is going to take every single one of us. So Working Families has been working with the Movement for Black Lives Electoral Justice Project, United We Dream Action, and others to get out a massive vote campaign. We also need to do everything to make sure that the right wing and white supremacist demobilization strategies, by scaring people at polling places, by putting massive intimidation practices into place, needs to end. And we are doing that with the election defenders and Joy to the Polls. One, we are training thousands of people. And if you want to be one of those, you can sign up to be an election defender right in the chat. And we're training people in de-escalation and voter care. We're gonna be handing out PPE, hand sanitizers to make sure that people are safe from COVID, because a mask has become a political statement. We are going to be making sure that we have trained de-escalators out there to talk to people, making sure that people feel safe, and that if anybody tries intimidation, that we will be there to de-escalate as much as possible. We are placing these folks across the country, training the people who are in their communities, and so you can sign up at the website in the link. And we're gonna spread joy and love. Because the thing is that I used to organize in Georgia in the South, so shout out to everybody who lives in Atlanta, and organized in the South, particularly when we were having the battle over the Confederate flag after the 9 people were killed by white supremacists still in a roof in Charleston, South Carolina. And the thing that the white supremacist militias, white supremacist organizing, is that they do not expect us to be organized and to be together and to be unified. And so when we go out there, we're gonna be unified and together. We're gonna bring music to the polls. We are recruiting artists, hiring producers, hiring artists that have been out of work for months because of COVID-19, and getting them to do roving concerts across the country on election day. Let's actually defeat their hate with joy. And there's one place that I know that this happened very recently. My people in Puerto Rico, when they ousted Ricky as the governor, they did it with joy. They did it with caballeros and people, people with horses, horse caravans. They did it with motorcycle gangs showing up to the Congreso. They did it with joy in our hearts. So it is important that we use the same spirit of the people of Puerto Rico, who are colonized people.
Just a reminder to go nice and slow.
Thank you.
For our interpreter.
No, you're fine. The people who are from Puerto Rico, we have to learn from them and bring joy as an act of resistance. The election defenders we're doing tomorrow, we have one of our last weekly trainings, and then we'll be going through the next couple of weeks, training people deeply on the art of de-escalation. And so not just the basics of de-escalation, but the art of it to handle any kind of situation. Also, we have plans for after election day, and I'm going to share, I believe I can do this. Boom. So I just wanted to present to people just the timeline. So this is the timeline of the Electoral College. The president is not president until Inauguration Day, but I just want to walk people through what happens and the different ways that, and the different scenarios that we're looking towards. So on Election Day, three states cannot actually start counting their ballots until Election Day. Pennsylvania in the morning, Wisconsin and Michigan after the polls close. And that happens on November 3rd. Between November 3rd and December 8th, there can be injunctions and disputes on ballot counting, but the deadline for resolving all election disputes across the country has to happen on December 8th. So any injunctions, court cases have to be done and accounted for on December 8th. On December 14th, oops, just went back in time, December 14th, electors, right? So I believe, and we believe at the Working Families Party, that the Electoral College should be abolished, but we still have it. So I'm gonna tell you how it works. On December 14th, there is a meeting of electors, usually in the state capitals. We are not sure still if they're going to meet via Zoom because of COVID. So electors meet in their states and cast their votes. On December 23rd, it's the deadline for the receipt of ballots, the electoral ballots, to be received by the Senate President. And if folks can put in the chat who the Senate President is, just to make sure we all know. Put it up. Anybody? Ooh, I'm just looking over here. All right, Mike Pence is the Senate President because the Vice President is the Senate President. And then on the 6th, there is a joint session of Congress to count elector ballots, and it's the new Congress that comes in. And on January 20th, it's Inauguration Day. And so if a determined movement, a determined campaign, if there is a contested election, we might be in a fight all the way to Inauguration Day. If there is not a settlement via Congress on who is president, the Speaker of the House becomes president on Inauguration Day. So just making sure folks actually know the timeline. Part of it is because we shouldn't have an electoral college, but part of it is also just making sure, they don't teach this all the time in government high school. And so here is some of the things that we're thinking as in terms of scenarios. So Trump can declare victory on election night and anywhere through before the meeting of electors. And I'm just gonna, boom. Biden can win, right wing can incite violence, and we're looking at maybe the Trump administration potentially not actually giving Biden's team a transition. We have to be paying attention to all of these scenarios because it's actually important. There can be ballot counting interference, particularly between the November 3rd and December 14th. And according to US Code 1 of the Constitution, unfortunately, states, and it's only happened, I believe, once in history, Max can probably correct me, more a scholar of history than I am, but it's only really happened once where they've actually submitted, a state can submit an alternate slate of electors. So when we're looking at the state legislators of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania that have done egregious things, like deny people in Flint clean and fair water, not have legislative sessions in Wisconsin, particularly after the stuff that was happening in Kenosha, and take away power from the executive that's Democrat. So we're looking, and Pennsylvania that has a Republican state legislator, we're looking to make sure and keep an eye on these 3 states to not submit alternative electors. And Trump can win the Electoral College as well. I don't fundamentally believe that that's going to happen, but that can happen, and there needs to still be an idea of being ungovernable out in the streets and making sure that. And there's the last scenario that I think is pretty hilarious, which is honestly, who knows what happens if Trump or Pence die of coronavirus. This is something that folks have talked about, but it is something, and I'm just gonna stop sharing my screen. But in short, we need to be prepared with a few things, and I just wanna end this here. So one, timing is a really important consideration. It is really, really important. The right wing and the fascists are waiting for anything to actually allow us to play into their handbook. So I think it's really important as people plan actions and plan what the tone is, that we're thinking about what they're already gonna roll out on us. 2, tone is really important. I think that there needs to be conversations about strategic nonviolence after the election. And I say strategic before that for a reason. It's about strategy, not about the principle of it. And the last thing, and the last thing about tone is, and I'm gonna go full theater, I'm a theater nerd. I think that one of the ways that we show our power is we show our creativity. Every single movement in the history of the United States had music, had dance, had creativity. When you think about from the original resistance of indigenous people fighting genocide, they fought it with also song and dance and theater and joy and practice. Enslaved Africans sang to each other, "Follow the drinking gourd," to escape slavery. From farm workers chanting and singing to each other. So I want to channel and say a word of, let's not lose our creativity when we're fighting a potential coup or when we're fighting a takeover of democracy, because it is within our hearts. They want to take our joy away. So let us not let them, and show them that they will not take away our creativity. Let's put on a carnival as a direct action in every capital in this country. Whatever we need to do, we should make sure that we are not losing our creativity post the election, so that we can come in and come strong against this fascist takeover. And again, you can sign up to the frontline.org or electiondefenders.org to be an election defender. And on the 4th of November at 8 p.m., we're gonna have a mass call right after all the Protect the Results actions, a mass call. And we wanna get 1 million people so we can give marching orders, wear gold, and beat this machine once and for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Nelini. That was soothing and inspiring both. Thank you so much. Feel free to shout your appreciations or whisper your appreciations in the chat. Next up, we have Jill from Seed the Vote speaking about what you can expect from Seed the Vote and who we're working with. Take it away, Jill.
Thanks so much, Kieran, and thank you so much to the whole Political Education Committee of Seed the Vote for pulling this together. Nelini, it's awesome to have you here, and thank you for taking the time. And the Frontline is absolutely one of the main groups that we are taking our leadership from nationally in these plans. So really grateful to you and to Max for doing the heavy lifting of laying out the scenarios that we are facing. And I get to share kind of what Seed the Vote's plans are moving forward. So I'm going to share my screen.
And Jill, just a reminder to go nice and slow.
All right, feel free to jump in if I go too fast. So it's really, really inspiring to have so many of you here on the call tonight. As you know, Seed the Vote was built out of a vision to really be a home and a vehicle for people committed to social justice, committed to movement building, to prioritize the work of defeating Donald Trump, of working on this presidential election, and to do that in a way that builds our power as movements long-term by supporting the work of grassroots organizations in swing states across the country. And these are just some of the partners that we have and are working with to do the really critical voter contact work across the country. So the first step in defending this election is to win, and you all are doing really incredible work to achieve that. We are at this point over 4,700 volunteers who have committed to over 17,000 shifts of volunteering to talk to voters in this election, which is a hell of a lot of time and dedication. So I just really want to appreciate and congratulate all of you. This has been an incredibly inspiring project to work on. You all can see the exponential growth in our volunteering and shifts. So, you know, September 1st, we were at 691 volunteers and we were feeling pretty good about that. But today we have almost 4,800 volunteers, and that's because all of you have been inviting your friends and family and colleagues and really lifting up the importance of doing this work. You know, here are just some of like the impacts that we're having. Pennsylvania Stands Up this week reached the milestone of having talked to 4 million voters. In Florida, we're seeing that in every single county, Democratic voter registrations and turnout is higher than Republican turnout. So what we are doing is absolutely working. And now we have teams on the ground in Pennsylvania, Florida, and Arizona. And with our partners at Unite Here and Lucha, we're poised to knock over 40,000 doors in Phoenix in the next few weeks. And that's just Seed the Vote volunteers. So I just wanted to start by lifting up that our first step in this process is to win, and you all are really doing everything to make that possible. The national partners that we are working with around the election and around the post-election scenarios are here. And we will really be looking to the Frontline and the Fight Back table as our core partners in the post-election process. So I want to talk about kind of Seed the Vote's strategic role, because as Nelini and Max mentioned, there are groups that have been really doing this scenario planning for many, many months. So that is not our role. So our role is, one, keep working on winning this election. So I want to be clear, like, let's stay focused, keep signing up for phone bank shifts, keep showing up and pushing it out to your people. And then, you know, we have this trusted relationship with you all and with our partner organizations. And so we're committed to being a resource for information and activation during however long this process might be. So that will look like hosting other sessions like this. It will look like inviting you to phone bank shifts post-election. And we will be also like connecting you with organizations like Working Families Party, People's Action, Mi Gente, Surge, where you can be involved long-term as members of those organizations for the long fight that is ahead of us no matter what happens in this election. Obviously, our core role as Seed the Vote is around volunteer mobilization, and that will continue. We will have phone banks set up on November 4th, and those will actually be up on Mobilize soon. What we will be doing on November, well, I'll get to that in a second. So we'll be doing some phone banking, and then we'll be mobilizing folks to the streets for the actions. And then lastly, you know, we have been really moved by the fundraising, grassroots fundraising success of Seed the Vote. We have over 3,000 individual donors, and we will continue to leverage that fundraising capacity as needed to move resources to the critical post-election work. And that can be work that we at Seed the Vote are doing or work that our partners are doing. We've been moving resources to other key players around the election as well. So here's a little bit of a timeline, and I want to just also give a shout out to my colleague who's been working with me to help lay these plans, and that's Helena Wong on the Generation Rising side of our work. So before and on election day, before election day, we are going to continue to do the voter contact work around GOTV. And then we are going to be talking with our partners and the various national formations to be on the same page, to be well coordinated. We'll share out some training opportunities, and actually Aliyah put in the chat now a list of training opportunities that's been put together by the Count Every Vote Coalition. It's quite comprehensive. You can find a lot of resources there. And then there'll be local action planning all across the country. On election day itself, in some of the battleground states, in-person watch parties are planned that could turn into direct action if needed. If Trump were to declare victory, if a major news network were to declare Trump the winner of the election, those watch parties could turn into direct action. We're still determining whether Seed the Vote, whether or not we'll have our own virtual event on election night. Feel free to drop in the chat your own 2 cents about whether you want that and your ideas. And then our in-person delegations in Florida, Arizona, and Pennsylvania will either be doing GOTV or pole defense, depending on the leadership of our partner organizations and their requests for us. The immediate days after the election are going to be full of activity. So November 4th, so for information, Seed the Vote will be staying in close communication with our partners at the Frontline and Fight Back table and Protect the Results to get the best information on what's happening. And we will be updating you all via email, via Zoom sessions. We might even have daily virtual sessions to just give an update on where things are at. Then there are national days of action called for November 4th, the Wednesday after the election, and November 7th. And you can see a map, or you can even post your own actions on a map at, I put the wrong URL in here again, it's protecttheresults.com. And we can expect in certain hotspots where there is a fight over stopping ballot counts, or we really need to be demanding that those ballots be counted, ongoing action throughout the week. Where requested, we will also mobilize for cross-state deployment to hotspots. And we have heard from Working Families Party in Philly that they're gonna want lots of people on the ground there. So we plan to extend our in-person program in Philadelphia through that week. And then lastly, I really want to lift up that we will be doing phone banking right away after the election. I was talking with Florida for All and Organize Florida today, and we will be on the phones on November 4th helping voters cure their ballots. So mail-in ballots where there's a question, that list is put out publicly. We can call those voters and help them to sign an affidavit and make sure their vote is counted. And then we will also be helping our partner organizations call their member lists, call their lists of supporters to show up to the mobilizations that are happening in their states. And then locally, I know we, Seed the Vote grew out of the Bay Area, so I did want to just lift up and shout out Bay Resistance. That's going to be planning the Bay Area action. So if you're local in the Bay Area, you can plan on an action 12 to 5 in Oscar Grant Plaza in Oakland. You can text RESIST to 41411 to get the rapid response updates. There's a pledge that you can sign and share. And then we're also organizing through a spokes council structure for the direct action planning in the Bay Area. And you can email Kimmy at Bay Rising Action to get more information about that. But first, let's win. So keep on volunteering to phone bank, keep mobilizing folks for in-person. With All In on October, starting this week, we now have 3 phone banks happening every day of the week, except for Fridays. And we hope that you'll join us. You can join for a full day, and we'll have community building space in the morning and in the evening before and after our phone banks. We hope, initially Seed the Vote was built with this vision of people taking 2 weeks off to go to Arizona. And so we really are asking folks to still take time off of work and really work on this election so we win. And we are still mobilizing for more people to sign up to come to Arizona, Florida, or Pennsylvania. So please share that opportunity with your community. So I'll pause and we'll see if we have any time to take any questions, but thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Jill, for sharing this with us. Again, so inspiring to see our growth and our power. And thank you all of you who are working to build that power collectively. As your moderator, I have the unfortunate job of telling you that we have 2.5 minutes left, and therefore it is unlikely we will be getting to questions. But I do have a question for you all, which is the Political Education Committee wanted to know from you, are you interested in us hosting a second follow-up session to go deeper into small group conversations? If you are, please let us know in this poll that has just popped up on your screen. It'll help guide what we offer next. So we'll take your input and we will be following up with you via email. And looking at what you're saying, it's likely we'll be following up to invite you to something. So once again, I want to give a shout out and thank you to all of our presenters, but also to our 12-person team that put this on. So thank you to Aaliyah for working the chat and dropping all those links. Thank you to our presenters, Max, Nelini, and Jill. Thank you to our tech people, Shreya, Becky, and Rose. Thank you to our captioner, Farzana. And thank you to our interpreters, Margot and Vero. It is an honor to have you all here with us. And we do have 1 minute. So if you got a really pressing question, you can try it out in chat, see what happens.
Someone just said, how can we review this? And if you signed up on Mobilize, you'll get a text, I believe, to respond with your evaluation of the event.
Awesome. Well, that is.
I think we'll be sending out the recording, Julie.
Yeah, I think the plan is to send out the recording, so keep an eye out for that and you can share it. I also saw a request if Jill and Nelini, if people could have access to your slides. So I don't know if either of you wants to speak to that.
I can share mine out.
I need to like cut the rest. It was in a whole other thing of nothing about this, so I'll make sure that they get to you though. Yes. Thanks,
Yeah, it looks
y'all.
like specifically that election timeline is what people are looking for.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. It's an honor to be in this work together, and we'll see you in the phone banks.